All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're watching in the world from. Excited to have another community conversation for you all. Today, we've got a special guest and a friend of mine, Nate Rose, who I'll pass the popcorn to in a sec. But just to orient you and to set the stage, these community conversations are something that we do to really center the voices and the stories of Black and Brown and other types of professionals, icons, role models that are out there doing really cool work in a variety of different spaces across engineering and media and entertainment and art and so many different things. So today we're going to focus a little bit more on fintech and crypto and blockchain and engineering and community with Nate. But yeah, really excited to have him on board to share a little bit of his story, share a little bit about his passion with you all. So without further ado, Nate, if you want to take a couple minutes to tell the people who you are, where you are, what you're focused on, and then we'll get into some fun Q&A subsequently.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, what's up, man? Thanks for having me. Nate Rose. I am a senior software engineer at Ripple. We are a payments company that focuses on decentralized payments for XRP. And we work with the XRP ledger for banking. I got into software engineer, or where am I? Let me answer that actually. I'm in the metaverse. So I'm actually traveling between coasts, between New York City, where I'm originally from, in California. So I go back and forth between the two just based off of what work demands. Yeah.
Excellent. And you started to talk about, how you got into the space. So just paint a little bit of a picture of kind of maybe the academic and the career trajectory up until this point.
Yeah. It's funny. Did sort of like a 10-year, 15-year review during like 2020 and looked at how I got into senior software engineering and Ripple and crypto. And I originally started off, a kid in the Bronx, doing music, doing theater, doing poetry, until I started realizing that busing at 125th Street is not the wave. is not the, being that struggling artist might get you some girls, but it's not it's not the wave long term or whatever. But I actually started to do some gaming around the time in high school, in my spare time, and I started realizing that I could actually hack games if I ran a few scripts. And these are games that you could play like MMOs, so that you can kind of gain the benefits of like paid subscriptions and everything. And this was before the times like 2006, 2007, 2008, before security and around gaming, especially online gaming, was very persistent for like flash games. And that kind of got me hooked. It's like, oh, if you actually know your way around the computer, you actually could do some interesting things. And that was also the time where MySpace was big, Facebook was just getting big. So folks were grabbing their HTML, being very expressive with themselves. So, I would take that opportunity to, go over the top, If you got a page, if you want to, show some expression, go ahead and like go really in depth into what the code can provide and, add that into your page to be as expressive as you want. And that turned into a gig on the yearbook committee when I was graduating, and started having conversations that led me into a computer engineering role that was my undergraduate major around that time. Leaving the Bronx, leaving kind of music to the side, something I'm always passionate about, but kind of investing into something that I felt was the future and where I wanted to point my attention to.
Yeah, we share music as a passion, but I had the same type of thing where folks in my high school, they were good enough to play and to tour with R&B acts and start to go from city to city. But I knew that I wanted to buy a house and to have a family, to have like insurance, like health insurance, like a 401k. So I couldn't necessarily see that going down the purely media and entertainment path. And it's still a hobby to this day, but I'm glad I sequenced it the way that I did, engineering first for those, a couple of years, and now everything is mostly sweet. So yeah, it's good to hear that. Like double click into that just a bit. Like what kind of, did you do instruments? I see a saxophone in the background. You mentioned poetry, like what kinds of stuff were you into in terms of music?
Yeah. That's not just for display. I actually do play it. Started off playing alto sax and tenor sax in sixth grade, and kind of actually persisted into doing it in high school. I went to a music school called Celia Cruz Bronx High School of Music. It's the Bronx version of actually a famous school that Fame, the movie Fame, is based off of, LaGuardia High School, where had a ton of talent comes out of that, including Nicki Minaj, Timothy Chalamet. So it goes from like acting to music, artistry, and they have like a connection with the Lincoln Center for Jazz. So I did a lot of performance arts during my high school, but I always kept a good repertoire when it came to academia, STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And again, what really got me into computers was the just learning around the space and navigating around it, and that's what got me hooked. But yeah. Saxophone was my thing. I actually even played in Disney World.
Hey,
Yeah. What they did is they actually got some of the composers for like Lion King, Hans Zimmer, and everything. And our school went down there and played for an audition.
I am learning new things about you, my friend, as we.
Yeah.
That's super.
Feels like a different life. Different life.
Yeah. So you mentioned like Ripple and crypto, and like so many people stumble into this industry, emerging technology field underneath the umbrella of fintech broadly. But like, tell the story. Actually, maybe pick up the story. You mentioned computer engineering and like school. Kind of take us through like the first couple of professional jobs, and like how the heck did you end up doing blockchain and crypto stuff?
Yeah, sure. There's a lot of time that passes. That's 10 years. And so a lot can change in that. So I went to Syracuse University, studied computer engineering, directly got embedded into National Society of Black Engineers because I knew the demand of STEM, especially with my background. Some people are exposed to the pre-calculus at an early age, some even at 8th grade, 7th grade levels. That wasn't the case. It wasn't necessarily offered at my school since it was a music emphasis and focus. So in college, I just always looked at it as, 4 years, get in, get out, and see how I like it, right? So during those opportunities, I would find myself kind of like really divesting into current, trending new waves in technology, including like robotics and AI at the time, which led me to an opportunity where I pursued a research summer school actually in Italy, where I got an opportunity to work with the iCub. It's actually an open source platform that allows students and researchers to come in, test out different concepts around robotics and artificial intelligence, and run it against a $80,000, $100,000 device, right? And from that experience, I was also hooked again because it gave me the opportunity to understand what this looks like at a global scale. I was the only Black student, the only undergrad student, and also the only American, right? So being able to represent so many different communities at that level, working with international talent, upskilling, understanding how AI was going to kind of form over the next course of 6 to 8 years, as I started to use that as a catalyst for embedding that into my studies, or even into my appetite for data and information outside of school, how I was learning and attaining that knowledge. It became my focus, which led me to landing a gig at Microsoft right out of school.
At Microsoft, I don't know that I think that's where we met. You weren't necessarily focused on crypto at that point, but I think you were definitely kind of an advocate, evangelizing kind of development and software engineering for a bunch of the Microsoft stack. And we share that Nesby connection as well in terms of the three things that'll stick out like forever for me is excelling academically, succeeding professionally, and positively.
Positively impacting the community. Verbatim.
It's like people 10, 15, 20, 30 years out from Nesby can still carry that and can still spit it out, verbatim, just because how important those three factors are. And talk about kind of moving through the time at Microsoft forward, but then also simultaneously taking the mission forward and being an advocate for STEM for the generation maybe coming behind you. I know you did some teaching and have always been like really, really interested in taking the community with you as you make strides in your own career.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you already achieved half of the mission once you land at a gig at Microsoft. And I think one thing that, even though those words are a bit formulaic, it can be, almost regurgitated over, people who've been with the organization for 30 years, it does need to be revised because the nature of being able to get yourself embedded into the tech industry is changing, right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't necessarily demand, going to university. It does demand you to bring your best and to know your stuff, right? Finding new trends, being innovative, being able to connect the dots and problem solve, right? And the kind of use of a university, though it definitely enables and allows upward growth for individuals who are coming from low-income communities, urban communities, it may not be the best for everyone. It could be an opportunity for understanding where you want to explore. And for me, I saw that as, when I entered Microsoft, I said, okay, I did it.
Mm-hmm.
But then you feel like you've hit a ceiling. You don't know what to do next, And that's where I started to look behind as how did I get here? Mm-hmm. And seeing if there was ways that I could provide, new pipelines and matriculation into this industry, because once I got there was no one that looked like me. That's why we got connected so quickly. It's like, oh, Brandon, where you at, man? I definitely know when you're not and when you are in the office, right? So, I started getting connected with like local schools in San Francisco and Oakland to see, what does it look like in Silicon Valley? And it didn't make sense once I got in there. It was the same thing that I saw in New York City, where, you're not seeing Black students, Black children really pursuing STEM. And this is happening adjacent or directly embedded into Silicon Valley, right? So the message isn't getting out there that, there's opportunity, there is knowledge to be attained, there is a career to be pursued for these students if they embed or pursue something in STEM. Whether it's starting their own, playing around with a computer like I did back when I was 15, 16, 17, and seeing where that goes, or, actually pursuing a university degree. So I took it as an opportunity to like, okay, during my spare time outside of Microsoft, when I am learning, the ropes about software engineering at scale in the tech industry, maintaining that lifestyle, I'm also trying to see how we can improve the matriculation pipeline. How do we get more Black students to see this as, an opportunity for them to pursue? And me in the classroom, teaching computer science at that level, at high school level, I'd have like side conversations just with, Black students around the hallways, like, hey, why aren't you taking that class, that computer science class? Oh, I don't qualify for it. It's like, no, you don't have to qualify for it. Oh, I'm behind on classes. Oh, it's not interesting to me. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'd rather do something else, right? When they use computers every day. We know that. They're on the phones. Everyone, if I asked them, where's your phone at? And they could show me everything, right? So I wanted to kind of like push that as an opportunity to like, hey, say, let's get some more Black students into these classes. And this is an ongoing effort, but it changes. It's with the technology. How do you bring that energy with students?
Yeah, I think that the technology innovation is one piece of it, but you hit on a very like important point about the storytelling and um, kind of the cultural relevance of the
Yeah,
education. Like if you need to wrap it in a certain shell such that it's accepted up front, and then after you kind of peel it back, then you get to the good stuff that'll make for them being good employees or good entrepreneurs if they wanted to launch out. I've seen tech partnerships with Kevin Durant was he when he was in the Bay Area, him being a venture capitalist, or Nas with Queensbridge.
right,
Like I think the culture coming into show the neighborhood and the streets that this is something that can um, verifiably like change your life. Like,
right,
some
right,
people, they idolize entrepreneurs and venture capitalists just because the results and the winnings are so outsized, and they like equate that to that person just being smarter than them or being better than them in some way. And I like to tell people that it's a lot about right place and right time. These are smart people for sure, but like being in this particular location at this particular point in history, it was something that I had to be in the Bay Area for a little while in order to figure out, like, oh, I had this imposter syndrome all this time, but it wasn't
right,
something I was doing wrong. It was just
yeah.
some things that are out of my control, and like positioning a little bit more than it was a deficiency on my side. So yeah, it's been fascinating just to observe and like to interact with the kids and with the community over a long period of years. Now it's been there more than a decade, but to want for them what is possible, and for them to have options and not to have to flip burgers or work at Foot Locker, or be a teller at a bank or something that's very much below what they can do, is something that I
Right.
the passion that we both share for sure. And education is the pathway, right, man? You gotta carve out time for it, which I tip my hat to you. Like you've gone through so much school, and um, now you get to reap the benefits and like give back to the next generation that hopefully is going to be just like you and just like me.
Yeah, that representation is huge, right? It's these students, they want to see someone like them at those ranks. If you invite someone from Microsoft who's coming in, who's looking to get connected with the Black community, they want to see, someone who represents them, their path, their family, right? That's why it's so huge when Steph Curry comes in and he's talking about tech, right? And the technology is getting even more sophisticated. They're leveraging it. There's entrepreneurs, from 15, 16. For me, that was busing at 125th Street playing sax. For them, it's selling and moving sneakers on StockX, right? How do we get them to the point where they could see the big picture? They could double click into the tech and say like, hey, you could build something that is the gap between what StockX is and what it could be. you know what does that look like? What skills do you need to know? You guys are already, of all the drops that are happening on sneakers and new Air Force, Jordans and everything that are dropping and whatever. So like what's can you guys get embedded into that space as well so that you can empower that tech?
Yeah.
um and that's sort of what led to like me finding my chapter with my team of Nesby Junior Bay Area, so that we can start to build like a new way, a new mechanism for getting curriculum that was engaging. Let's take some of these PhD students, some of these people who are at the height of their careers, who are working on something very innovative like drone technology, drone racing, AI, environmental engineering, which came directly at a time where, some of these students had to miss school because of, wildfires that were happening in the Bay Area, so that they can understand what's happening. These are professions that they can pursue, and there's Black individuals who are currently leading the way in those professions as well.
Yeah, so important. And like to think about new ways to do it, like now that you're in kind of the fintech, blockchain,
Yeah.
crypto industry, I wonder, kind of what thoughts you have and what conversations you'd love to kick off with kind of the next generation to challenge like the status quo of what like ownership is, or what education has to be in order for you to be successful. And you mentioned metaverse in the beginning of the call. Like, what are your thoughts in like how we could leverage the technology, or how you would like to see students take advantage of the just the opportunity that's in front of them right now?
So metaverse, crypto wasn't cool for a long time. Remember that it was kind of like a condescending nature from like big tech towards crypto. What do they call them? Crypto bros, right?
Mhm.
It was very condescending. It was very like somebody's casino that, you just keep spinning the wheel, right? For like most of my time at Microsoft. And even I remember there's one moment during my undergrad degree, and this guy, as a senior design project, said, "Hey, do you want to create a Bitcoin mining machine?" And I said, "Oh, who?" He said, "A
Yeah.
Bitcoin mining machine." This is 2013. I was like, "Man, that sounds way too hard. I'm just trying to get out of here."
Yeah.
So I did like some computer vision thing, and can't find that guy anymore. He's not even on LinkedIn. So I think he just completely disappeared after
He
you
might be
finally.
like, yeah, he might be like living on Mars, or he's rich enough to be off of planet Earth somewhere just chilling.
Right, right. I always look back at that one moment. It's like, what if I just maybe that, took the,
Yeah.
you know, but yeah, for most of my part, I always saw like crypto as this kind of like, void space that everyone talked about and made fun of, because they didn't necessarily understand what was happening, or the news and stories that were articles that were being produced were kind of highlighting the malicious activity that was happening as well. And that's because it was still in its, entry level, still being built out. Bitcoin is a product of 2008, when the recession happened. It came at the, understanding that, hey, we need to take something that is predominantly owned by banks, value and money, and take it to something that is owned by individuals, by something that can't be disrupted, can't be injected into, and that's a network, the internet, right? And that's progressed, and that's been, formed into this thing that we call the crypto space and decentralized finance, where during COVID, I just took the time. I was at Microsoft for 6 years, and I said, you know, what else you got better to do than sit on your couch after work and, read up on some certain stuff that you finally have the time to like take a look at? Because at that time, partner calls, customer calls, building engineering, and like the product roadmaps is being adjusted. So we're trying to get a pulse on what's happening before we move on. So I started taking a look at what this space was doing. I saw a few peaks and a few waves that was came out of 2018 when it came to Bitcoin and people making some money. But I wanted to understand like the technology, what's the value in what they call blockchain technology, and what it can do. And I started reading up on it, and I said, okay, this makes sense. And then that's actually how I landed in Ripple in June 2020. And what gave more energy to me being very confident in my decision and making that switch, especially during the height of the pandemic, was how much crypto and the DeFi space is accessible to the Black community. Seeing individuals who, from athletes to investors, to folks all across the vertical, getting embedded into this space because they see the information is accessible. They see value in it, whether you're an artist who's been producing so much digital art for the past 5-10 years and been getting paid scraps. Now you get ownership, something that is a high priority when it comes to the Black community, when it comes to creative works and artistry. Seeing that being embraced, and having my uncles and my aunts on WhatsApp text me about like, hey, have you heard about this cryptocurrency?
Yeah.
And I'm like, how do you even know about that? What are you listening to? You know what I mean? So like seeing how information was being moved, especially in the Black community, that I said like, okay, this is also for us, you know? And this is a wave that we could get in and get embedded in, and we can have individuals kind of utilize and see how this can benefit us moving forward. And I said, okay, this was a good decision to make.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like we both like studied engineering and kind of come at it from one angle. Then there's also kind of this accessibility that you talk about. You could be someone who's not an engineer and still kind of take part in some of these ecosystems in a way that would help the movement and help the wave continue to build and to move forward. Um, I wonder if you have any thoughts about kind of the non-technical, kind of the ecosystems and kind of the network effects and some of the benefits if you're not, a NSBE engineer who studied electrical or computer science or computer engineering.
Yeah, yeah. It comes down to trust, right? The trust is something that could be quantified actually now. It's do you trust your banks? Do you trust certain institutes? And what that's doing is converting what we typically use, contracts and legal agreements, trust, into code, right? So we were building a virtual community. Everyone was offline for like 2 years, working from home. And people were getting engaged. They were getting connected through things like Zoom. The cameras were on in your household, right? And we were able to still maintain connection through our devices and technology, right? So there's that idea of like a virtual community, and then there's also how we can quantify the network that's still connecting us all. How do we also move monetary means for that, so that we're able to get engagement into communities that we may necessarily not trust, right? An example of this would be like, hey, I'm on Twitter, I find a hashtag, I see an organization that's trying to like spawn some sort of new effort. How do I contribute to this new organization that's being spawned out of an effort that's on Twitter? But also I want to make sure that my capital, my funds, my trust is going into this organization, and it's going to be credible, right? And that's sort of what this blockchain network is trying to do. It's trying to build this connectivity of trust, but in monetary means of how we quantify that trust within code, right? So that evolves. That's at the base level. It evolves into kind of like NFTs, but like artistry. That evolves into how do we build organizations around that? How do we build an example of this would also be like Black Lives Matter. That's a completely virtual organization. How do you build trust with people you've met online? How do you move funds with people you've met online? And that's where you look into new technology like blockchain technology to see if that could administer and foster the movement of that trust, those funds around people into this system.
Yeah. So for folks that might not be kind of versed kind of in blockchain, I'll rewind a little bit and just call out when we talk about blockchain, there's multiple blockchains that exist. There are public ones and then there are private ones. But for the ones that are public, each of the blockchains consist of many what are called nodes. These nodes are computers that are run in a decentralized fashion, and a lot of the transactions that happen on this network of computers, all of them actually, to Nate's point about trust, they're recorded in a transparent way that anybody can inspect after that block has been written to the blockchain. And each of these blocks are sequenced together as time moves forward, so that your money could never just disappear or somebody could never just run away with it. You could see that, oh, this amount of currency went from this place to this wallet at this time. And that virtue of that transparency is what we're talking about when we talk about building trust. And then there things on top of these blockchains, these D apps that can do stuff with basically software interacting with the blockchain. So stuff like lending, stuff like borrowing, stuff like just reporting information, and analytics types of things. There's so many different business models that are spawned by this new way to do things. And it cuts out a lot of that middle tier.
Yeah.
You ask yourself, why does it cost so much money to send my relative in another country,
Yeah.
$100, USD, and convert it to their, native currency where they live? And it's like, oh, okay, we've built this system that's got so many middle people inside of it that is bloating and making the value erode. So I think the blockchain and the crypto ecosystem is just an alternative way to do things that, again, is more transparent and a more egalitarian, more accessible to everybody, so
Right.
that people who have been historically marginalized throughout history have a better shot at, moving down the field without being hamstrung or, having disadvantages. So a little bit of a primer, Nate. You might have to throw some more onto it
Yeah,
as well.
definitely.
Not anything, but
Definitely.
for folks who are just on ramping into it, that's a little bit about what we're talking about.
And the use cases that you mentioned, especially for a marginalized community, if you're looking to use, was it Washington Mutual, or do some sort of wire transfer and send money to, let's say, Jamaica or Nigeria, and a percentage of that is taken out, right? And then they won't have the funds until like 3 to 5 business days, right? How can we accelerate the process? How do we minimize the costs? That's being explored right now, and through blockchain technology, through this decentralized finance space. Or if we want to get into the historical context of like mortgage lending and small and medium business loans, there's a human in the loop, and that has had a history of unfair contracts being issued, or unfair decisions that are being held at that level by that institute. So we are exploring ways to make sure that it's flat and it's level, by using blockchain technology, right? So that's actually how the emergence of like redlining and that came into play. So if we can't necessarily trust our banks because there's some sort of biases, how can we place this into code, an algorithm, a network? And so that's how everything is accessible when it comes to funds being moved, being transferred.
Yeah, that's one of the coolest realizations that came to me, is like the removal of conscious and unconscious bias, right? You submit application, you push the paper across the desk to a banker, they say, okay, we'll review it.
Yeah.
And then 2 weeks later, you get a denial. It's like, I don't understand enough about the system to figure out whether this was like a just or an unjust decision. And the ability to kind of pull back the curtain on some of that is super cool. And to have software kind of just running so that even the creator of the software isn't able to go back into it and pull back those decisions once it's live is something I think is given everybody a more fair shot once things stabilize and once we've got policy and regulations in place and all that. So yeah, really exciting times, and to be able to be in it for our day jobs is super cool.
Yeah, transparency. What happened behind that curtain? What can we see? How decisions were made? What was the reason behind that? The denial for it. And when you have something that's embedded into like a code, you're giving an audit into how those decisions came about.
We'll talk a little bit about how we educate, how we kind of give people the knowledge to get started if they wanted to kind of make a career in blockchain, we haven't touched on like the idea of a DAO, like a decentralized autonomous organization, as a way to organize. But um, what would you recommend for, I just graduated high school, or I'm just recently out of college and don't know exactly what I want to do in the space, but I want to get started. Like, where would you direct folks who are interested in this blockchain and digital asset space?
Yeah, this is what we talk about, like decentralization, but when you decentralize, you also give birth to malicious and misinformation
Mhm.
around things, because now anyone can be able to contribute some sort of article or data point in regards to learning about crypto, right? Learning about DeFi. Um, so if I'm a high school student, let's say I want to go to an HBCU, I know that there's actually the Morgan State University FinTech Center that actually is leading and paving the way when it comes to the blockchain research university initiative, which is a collective of other HBCUs that are targeting to upskill and provide curriculum around this space, around decentralized finance, blockchain technology. And it's a really rich curriculum that they've started producing over the past 6 to 8 years. So starting with the conception of a lot of these, common words like Ethereum, they've been on it to produce it, and it kind of shows that accessibility, how the Black community was also working in tandem with the growth of the space to make sure that it's embedded into the curriculum for students to use and learn about. For fresh out of college, or maybe individuals who are working and want to learn more about this space, YouTube is a great source. I believe Coinbase produces a good amount of content around just different technologies that are emerging around blockchain, whether that's non-fungible tokens, whether that's decentralized autonomous organizations, or just the 101 and fundamentals of just learning about DeFi and blockchain technology. You need to actually associate some of the knowledge that you're digesting with an institute. In these examples, like HBCUs, like Coinbase, who's like paving the way when it comes to businesses who are recognized as leaders in this effort, because you'll find a lot of misinformation out there as well. Invest in this, trading advice as well, and you need to take account on that, of what malinformation that you're hitting. And then there's also the CoinDesk Bureau. So they provide a good amount of like updates that's quite credible, whether that's regulations and policies that are being written around the space that are being recognized by international and local US laws, how you can understand maybe the emergence of new currencies and tokens that are being offered and what to take. And then also, hopefully you can still hear me. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you. Yep.
Yeah. And then also they're just
All right. I think you did disappear for a second. Let's do a quick reset. Mic check 1 2 1 2. One second here. All right. I think we've got you back now. Mic check 1 2 1 2.
Yeah. I was saying some crazy stuff. There's like, now we can't get all that information out there. What? Just like cut that out.
Yeah. So like, I think the last thing I heard you talking about was how to get started, basically, and just ideas for folks who are recent college grads to get embedded into the space. Some resources. A good insight to pull out was to tie what you're hearing and finding on your YouTube searches and your Google searches to tie it to credible institutions, whether they
Right.
be businesses or whether they be like universities, just because there is a lot of scams out there. There's a lot of misinformation out there. So I thought that was definitely a good insight to pull out to try to associate what you're learning to leaders in the space, whether that
Right.
be business or academia.
Yeah, all your aunts and uncles who are sending these crypto WhatsApp messages, just send them some credible resources so that they could start sending that around. So many forward messages that I get. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been interesting too to flip the way that I'm comfortable learning. You know, typically when I learn about a new blockchain project or crypto project, I'm going to Discord to jump into a group and go through a bunch of different channels, see what people have been saying, try to understand for myself how much support financially from the community, how much enthusiasm I feel um, for myself, but then also for the collective to tell me how much effort I want to put into learning about it. And
Right.
if you're a developer, you got to consider like network effects. So if you're contributing code to something that's very niche and very small, yeah, your code could be deployed on that small blockchain or with that small project. But when it comes to scale, when it comes to interoperability and kind of broad use and access, should I learn Solidity or Rust or something that's got these massive networks like Ethereum that are able to take advantage of the network effects that have already been built? So a couple of considerations in terms of whether you want to learn as a student this stuff, whether you want to develop for these ecosystems, and as a business too. I think the bridges between all of the different blockchains will
Mhm.
ultimately be the thing that mirrors kind of the system that we already have, right? So you can send money from Wells Fargo to Bank of America to Chase to some bank in London to some bank in South
Right.
America, as all of those financial institutions have these, quote unquote, bridges built between them. So I'm really excited to see kind of the interconnection and interoperability of all these different blockchains in the future so that we as the consumers of it, we as the technologists and the people who are trying to get some real utility out of this technology will be able to realize that sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and also embedding that into devices like ATMs, point of sales, so you can start using your actual crypto um, and wallet against physical realm activity, so you don't need to liquidate that, right? Because typically we have to liquidate it into a local currency, and that's how you can move and do some sort of activity, monetary activity with it. And the bridges is you're right on the money, like things like Uniswap and a few others and consortiums that are being produced so that there is interconnectivity between the different networks. It's a bit identical to like Plaid and Venmo and PayPal, what they're doing with local fiat currency. Yeah, it's still the decentralized applications that are being built out and produced is very hot right now when it comes to investing in VC as well.
Yeah, I think I liken it to, a bunch of this started in 2008, and that was an important year for me because that was when the first iPhone app that I had ever made launched on the iOS App Store, and we put an Android app out the year after that. But right as that was happening, it feels very similar to what's happening right
Yeah.
now. Like this new mobile, new app technology is going to take everything to the moon and solve all the world's problems and make all the developers rich. It seems, it feels similar in terms of the energy and the optimism and just the buzz around what's happening here in crypto and blockchain right now. I don't know how you feel, but like I feel similar vibes.
Yeah. So, developers or people, folks who are still in university, don't sleep on that C class. It's continuous. It's still being used and leveraged in blockchain technology. So half the time, we're just using C++ as the fastest way to get and code against the network. So it's versatile with the new applications that are being produced right now.
Yeah. So let's hit them with a little bit of like when you're not working and studying and focused on this stuff we've been talking about. Just what are some of the things that you do kind of for balance? You've got to find other hobbies and other things to help you kind of maintain if you're an engineer or you're a business person. So just share with the listeners a couple of things that you like to do kind of outside of the crypto sphere, outside of the tech world.
Yeah. I actually recently just pursued a degree in neurotechnology and been reading about just neuroscience, health and well-being, using that as a scientific foundation to understand mental health. So, I'm a huge advocate, especially for the Black community, Black men, Black women, for, therapy, counseling at all levels, whether it's relationship, personal, or even career life coaching as well. Just to have that as an outlet and connecting that to me with the neuroscience and how this could be persisted, what's innate to like human nature, is really interesting work. And I think that might be, especially, 2008 paved the way for crypto. I'm really curious what 2020 is going to pave the way for down the road. And it might be a health focus, a health specific technology, just because of the emphasis on, what the implications of what COVID and the pandemic brought to us. I know that's not cool. That is like, okay, you do more work right outside of school. That ain't fun. Yeah, I find time to kind of like, do some like outdoor activities. So I have a motorcycle all the time. I'm sort of like a tinkerer. So I like to, take my bike to the shop and everything and like work around it and take a look at it, listen to a lot of music. I try to put myself back in the day to those sax days for jazz. I'm trash now. And I look back at some of my friends who, stayed with it when it came to music, and I respect them. Some of them are like professors now at universities, and others, still get down in West Village in New York City. And, I really appreciate the talent that they were able just to, get with it. But like for me, yeah, that's how I find my pastime as well. And just reading, just consuming. One thing that I tell some of my students out of the nonprofit organization, SB Junior Bay Area, is, read the room. It's there's waves that are happening. There's a lot of things that are occurring right now. And, as I'm a student, maybe in high school or in college, and I'm finding something that's trending right now, is there an opportunity to see if I can see that as the start to something more that can be persisted over the course of the next 10 years? Do I want to explore that even more? And it just allows you to do, your research, and there's so many tools that are available for everyone, whether that's on YouTube, Google, just Khan Academy, Coursera, there's certifications. Universities are now providing kind of like online accessibility for their curriculum. Yeah, it's crazy when it comes to the amount of knowledge at your fingertips. Stack Overflow wasn't a thing when I was in school, man. It was not a thing at all. So yeah, that's what I would say for students.
Yeah. So to double click into the music for a little bit, like who are some of the top 2 or 3 recently on the Apple Music or on the Spotify playlist, jazz, hip hop, like pick your genre, a couple of recommendations that you might have for the listeners out there.
Silk Sonic, Anderson .Paak, Bruno Mars, killing it. That's all 3, top 3. Bruno Mars, Anderson .Paak, Silk Sonic. I mean, they brought like an old classic way of making music and made it modern. And I'm just a huge fan of Anderson .Paak. This guy is phenomenal. He sings, he's a drummer. I think he plays 2 or 3 other instruments as well. And he could flow. maybe two, a lot of Afrobeat I've been listening to. I know it's hot right now, but specifically I'm a piano coming out of South Africa. And this is where I'm looking at, the States and, Black folk in the States, like it's very leveled now. So, things that are getting popping in England and, Lagos and Johannesburg, it goes global because it's so accessible for that music to travel. It doesn't have to be produced by, studios out of ATL, studios out of Hollywood and everything. So I'm a piano, Silk Sonic. I think, yeah, I'll go with those two.
Yeah, I love that. Let's see what I've been listening to recently. A lot of Derek Hodge. He's a bassist out of Philly. And he's played with Robert Glasper and Chris Dave and like some of those guys. I've been listening to a lot of him lately. And another bassist that I really like is Thundercat. So you probably heard him before. He's more like funky and soulful, but his brother, Ronald Bruner Jr., is also a mean drummer. So Thundercat and his brother, the Bruner brothers, are probably top of my top right now.
Bruner brothers, I gotta get on that one.
Yeah, Bruner. Yeah. And lastly, I love like Herbie Hancock. He's like the guy that's been through all these decades, kind of just making cool stuff. So I'm a big fan and a student of his. So everybody listening and watching, feel free to go check you out some jazz music, check you out some R&B and soul music, and yeah, that'll be cool.
First, I would suggest the first two Herbie Hancock songs you gotta listen to is either, was it Watermelon Man?
Yeah.
Or is Red Clay Herbie Hancock? I think that is.
I don't know. I know Butterfly is one of my favorite Herbie Hancock songs.
Yeah.
But yeah, he stood the test of time, man. He's still kicking. He's got a cool masterclass series. So for any masterclass fans out there, he shot probably a good 20 hours of content just talking about his craft, but then also talking about life and stuff that is just useful as a human being. So
I need to check that out.
Yeah. Well, I know we're close to the top of the hour, man. I just want to say thank you on behalf of our community. It's been a pleasure to be able to hang out, and hopefully we exposed kind of some of the story and some of the opportunity for the brothers and sisters that are out there. They're going to watch, they're going to listen to this. So for that, man, we salute you and say we're looking forward to all the stuff you're going to do in the future. And just a big thank you for spending an hour with us.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
Cool. Enjoy the weekend, and we'll see all of y'all next time. Like we say always at the end of these, drink water, mind your business, take some walks outside, get some fresh air, and be gracious with yourself and with other people. So until next time, we'll talk soon.